Hello, everyone. It's Britt Simon here. So, firstly, it's about to be a new year. For 2023 is starting tomorrow. So, I hope everyone has a great new year, and I hope this year is the year you get your green card. So, um, there's a little bit of excitement tonight and tomorrow because every year we get access to the SEAC data for the current year, the year that's ongoing. So tomorrow we will, for the first time, see SEAC data for DV 2023. And I wanted to explain a little bit about what we're going to see from the SEAC data. Now, as we stand at the moment, the government have changed some things on the servers that will make collecting the SEAC data a little bit more difficult. And it may take us a little bit longer than normal to get that data. And it may not be possible to do daily refreshes in the future as we have been doing in the past. And so we'll have to see how that goes. So between Zarthisius and I believe Frank is probably going to do this as well. We've got two people that very kindly scrape the data from the SEAC system, which I'll explain in a few moments. And that gives us a lot of information about how the year's going, about your case, and so on. So I wanted to explain what we will be able to tell once we have the SEAC data, because for some months now, when people have been asking me to make predictions or how is my case number and that sort of thing, I pretty reliably say I'm not going to make a prediction and I can't tell you much about your case number because we don't know enough data. The data that we're waiting for is what we'll get access to tomorrow. And so it's an important step, right? And so let me explain a little bit about the SEAC data. And I've done just a quick sort of explanation here. So what can it tell us? The things that I'm hoping to get tomorrow, excuse me, let me just, the things I'm hoping to get from the data tomorrow, the SEAC data will tell us, as long as we can get it tomorrow, will be these things: the highest case number in each region. So this is the highest case number given to a selectee, not necessarily the final case number for the year that will be successful. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about the highest number issued in each region for a selectee. Okay. Now I've made some predictions about what those numbers will be to in the past, and actually, let me just, while I'm here, I just gave those to Zarthisius the other day. Yeah, let me just tell you what my predictions are going to be. My predictions, and these could be very wrong, but my predictions are that AF region will be about 82,000, AS region will be about 31,000, EU region will be about 36,000, Oceania 2,600, and South America 4,200. Okay, they're the predictions that I've explained in the past, mathematically calculated based on some factors like previous year's density and that sort of thing. But we don't really know. These are just complete guesses. They could be completely wrong. So you can tell me tomorrow, in the next few days, how wrong I was about those estimates. And I've got no further data that says, yeah, they're looking good or they're looking bad. You know, they're just my estimates right now. Tomorrow, though, we have the actual, the real highest case numbers in each region. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to know. We'll also know the density distribution. Now, that may not mean very much to some of you, and I'll have to explain what density is, and I'll explain that when we're looking at a previous year's data in a few moments. I'm going to show you some data, so I'll come back to that. Country draw cutoffs and their impact on accept countries. So if you've studied my videos before about the draw process, you'll understand density a little bit, and you'll understand the draw cutoffs. But again, I'm going to explain that using a previous year's data and Asia region to explain a little bit more about that in this video. So stay with me, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. On Zarthisius's site, and I'll give you the link to that, but on his site, once he's got the data, he can actually tell you how many cases precisely there are in front of your case in your region. Okay, why is that important? Well, the people in front of your case should have priority above your case. They should be going first, right? Lower case numbers go first. So in reality, it's important for you to know how many cases there are in front of you to see how many people are in front of you and how many of them might proceed, be approved, how many would be refused, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of interesting. And then what progress has been made so far during October, November, and December? How many visas have been issued so far? How many interviews have been scheduled? Which embassies have scheduled any interviews and which haven't scheduled any interviews? There could be some of those. Okay, so we can begin to understand which embassies might be, not performing as well. And then overall response and processing rates, we're going to get a little bit of information about that as well. But we get a bit of a picture instantly about the first 3 months of progress, right? So it's an important thing. Okay, let me have a look at some, let me explain some data with you. So actually, let me show you this one first. This is if you go to Xarthisius's site, I've used DV 2021 data here because it's a nice clean year. I'll show you why in a moment, why I'm saying that. But it's fairly easy to see the impact of country cutoffs in this particular year. So it's just a pretty good example. It doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that DV 2023 will be precisely like this. I'm simply saying this is how the year looked in DV 2021. It helps me explain some of the concepts to you. Okay, so as we're looking at this, this is Asia, and it divides each of the number ranges into 1,000 chunks, 1,000 case numbers. So from 1 to 1,000 is in this first rectangle here, and then from 1,000 to 2,000 is in the next rectangle, and so on, all the way up to about 37,000. This particular year went just over 37,000 as the highest case number. Remember, my prediction for DV 2023 is that the highest case number will be about 31,000, maybe 32,000 for Asia. But in this year, it was 37,000. And so if we just focus on the very first block at the moment, and I'll show you what these color coding, what the colors mean. So let's say there are 1,000 cases. There are 1,000 cases in the first 1,000 case numbers, right? However, there's a big chunk of blue, which is denoted as a whole, okay? A whole is a case number which has got no case attached to it. And what happened was that, again, if you've watched my videos about the draw process, cases are numbered automatically from 1 to 1,000, let's say. And then over a period of time, the government disqualifies some of those cases even before the results are announced. They disqualify those cases because they think they're duplicate entries or fraudulent entries, or perhaps they haven't put a suitable photo in, or they've used a photo that was on some other entry and they just disqualify both the cases. So for a number of reasons, they disqualify a number of cases, right? And so in this particular year, you can see that almost 40%, almost 400 of the first 1,000 cases were disqualified and they became a whole, okay? So those cases never even knew that they were in the first 1,000 case numbers. When they logged in to check their results, they would simply see you are not selected. But in reality, they had been selected, they had been numbered in the first 1,000 cases, but then they had been disqualified before the results were announced, okay? So that's what holes is, and that's pretty important. And you can see that the number of holes is roughly, in Asia in DV 2021, is roughly about 40, just over 40%, up until case number 10,000, right? Just up until nearly 11,000. So, and then all of a sudden, the number of holes increases and the case numbers actually drop, okay? The real cases drop. So what we're talking about here is density of how many cases there are per 1,000. So In the first 1,000 cases, there were about 600 cases in the first 1,000. And in the range from, let's say, just from 12,000 to 13,000, this range here, there were there were only sort of 37%, 370 cases per 1,000 in that particular 1,000 range, right? So that's the density number that I talked about earlier, or the density principle I talked about. And you can see that the density decreases, or the holes increase, as the range continues, okay? And it seems to be in sort of 3 blocks. There's a continuation where the holes is about 40%. Then there's an area where the holes is around about 60, 62%. And then there's an area where the holes are nearly 80%, okay? What causes that, right? So you're probably wondering, why does it look like that? And so I've explained that a little bit here. So I've taken the same chart and I've shown actually where the entries came from in that particular year. The block here at the bottom is about 20% of the overall cases, and that was from the rest of Asia, okay? Asia region, but not Iran and not Nepal, okay? The Nepalese cases were all concentrated in the first 10,000 cases or so. So you can see there's a block of Nepalese cases there. And then Iran were concentrated up until about case number 21,000 in DV 2021. Now, why does that happen? Well, that's purely a result of the number of entries that each of those countries have. So if you had, let's say you had 5 million entries in some region, if 2 million were from Nepal and 2 million were from Iran, and only 1 million were from the rest of Asia, then the proportions of the selectees would be something like 2, 2, and 1, right? For every 5 cases, there would be 2 from Nepal, 2 from Iran, and 1 from the rest of Asia. However, because that would give us an enormous number of cases for Nepal, who would never have the opportunity to proceed, an enormous number of cases from Iran, who would never have the opportunity to proceed, what they do is they say, okay, we've got enough cases from Nepal by case number 10,000, and so we're just going to stop drawing cases from Nepal now. We're going to disqualify the rest of those cases. So that's why they get all of their cases concentrated in the first 10,000 in this particular year, right? And then Iran had a similar sort of impact. They also got stopped at a certain point, again, depending on the number of entries they have, and depending on the number of derivatives on the case, we can sort of tell from the number of selectees they have overall. And they got stopped early as well, right? But the rest of Asia continued. Now, in this year, there were 3,800 selectees from Nepal, and there were 6,000 from Iran. And that tells me that the number of derivatives on average per Nepalese case is lower than Iran. But there were still a few more cases from Iran than there were from Nepal. And this is kind of how it looks, right? So roughly speaking, there were 20% of the cases in the first 1,000 cases from Nepal, 20% were from Iran, and 20% were from the rest of Asia, and 40% were holes. That's the first 1,000 cases. And as you go through the process here, you'll see that the makeup or the proportion of the cases becomes different as you go through. Once Nepal cases are ended, then there are 60% holes, 20% from Iran, and 20% from Asia. No more from Nepal. Okay, so hopefully these two graphics, this and the other one, are sort of making things a little bit easier for you to understand. And this is where the data comes from. It's DV charts. Xarthisius.xyz, right? So I'll put that link below the video so you can go and have a look at that. And as you can see, I'm looking at DV 2021 data. You can also see that Xarthisius has all of these past years, so you can go and look at other years, and you can go and look at other regions as well. I just used data will become available for DV 2023 in 19 hours. I hadn't seen this before like that. So yes, great one. But yeah, you can look at other years, and you can go and study the data if you want to look at other years, see how they looked. You can look at embassies. He's put an extraordinary amount of work into presenting the data that he's able to show here. But what I'm doing is simply choosing a region and showing how the chart looks. Now, the data looks different for every year, obviously. Like this is DV 2022 data. You can see that there is there's a situation here where both Nepal and Iran both met their caps, their country caps, at about the same point in time, right? Or the same number, roughly within 1,000 numbers of each other. And so there was a fairly sort of big drop off all of a sudden. It doesn't look like there's 3 steps. It looks like there's 2 steps, but actually there's 3 steps in there. It's just that both Iran and Nepal ended at the same sort of time. And as you go through the years going back, if we look at 2020 data, again, we look at Asia, you can see, again, there's the same sort of thing. Now, if you look at other regions had sort of similar situation, but actually some of this data is probably not representative. Let's not look at 2020 data because it was a bit of an anomaly in terms of the data. But if we look at an old data like 2018, you can see that Africa has a similar sort of perspective where there's a reduction in the number of actual cases. There's more holes in later case numbers. And that's because some countries were cut off. Now, I'm expecting that we'll see some countries from Africa and EU cut off. We see that every year. And again, that's just simply because of the number of people that enter from those countries. I'm not certain which countries will be cut off this year. I haven't really studied the data yet, but there will be some countries cut off, and the distribution of cases will be somewhat similar to what I was explaining from the other chart for the Asia data. Okay, this country cutoff thing, by the way, doesn't happen in Oceania and also in South America. Why? Well, it's because they get a similar number of they don't get one country or 2 countries that overwhelm the number of entries compared to the rest of the region. They have a fairly sort of even number of entries from each of the countries participating. Therefore, they don't get one country that has a skewed number of the entries. And so Oceania and South America won't have this distribution, but what they do have is they have holes, right? So if we look at Oceania, that's actually not a great year. Let me look at DV 2021, Oceania. Okay, that shows you, for example, in 2021, DV 2021, the highest case number was about 3,400, but you can see that there were a high number of holes, a big number of cases disqualified before the actual announcement of results, right? So so that's how that will look. I think it will look more like this, but we'll see tomorrow. We're going to see all of this data tomorrow. Okay, so hopefully, what have I explained here? Let me just check what I've explained. So I've explained to you the highest case number in each region, right? We're going to see the highest case number. We're going to see the distribution of the density distribution, the distribution of cases. We'll see how many holes there are, etc. We'll see country draw cutoffs. They're draw cutoffs, not the exact numbers. I'm going to speak about that in a minute. And on Xarthisius' site, you'll be able to see how many cases are in front of your case. And as I mentioned, we'll be able to see the progress so far. We'll be able to look at specific embassies and see all of that data. Okay, so let's talk about accept countries. I try and explain this all the time, but people, sort of struggle with the concepts here. And, but again, Iran and Nepal in particular, is a good example of why Nepal, pretty much every year, has an accept designation on it. Now, for Nepal, in DV 2021, the rest of Asia went up to 37,000, right? and Nepal had all of its cases concentrated in the first 10,000 cases, right? And most Nepalese cases go to one embassy. They go to Kathmandu, right? So if they want to try and spread that work amount over the full year, instead of cutting up 37,000 into 12 chunks, right, and releasing that amount per month, they would have to be cutting the 10,000 up into 12 chunks and releasing that amount each month if they were going to average it, right? They don't do exactly this, but you can see that if they made if they want to spread the Nepalese workload over the full year, they have to have an accept number so that they can slow down the numbers for the visa bulletin for that particular country. The same thing applies to any of these countries that you see the accept number, Algeria or Egypt, Iran. The same thing applies, where there's a large number of cases, usually a small number, 1, 2, or 3 embassies that are doing all of that work. So a lot of cases in a very small number of embassies, and they want to spread that workload over the year. That's why there is these accept countries, right? And so that's basically what's going on there. So hopefully you'll understand that. With that visualization, you'll understand that a little bit better. Okay. So I'm hoping that's sort of whetted your appetite a little bit for the data that we're going to see tomorrow. I'm hoping that that's sort of explained things a little bit for you. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we may have to be a bit patient because although Xarthisius has got around the government's latest attempt at slowing us down with collecting this data, it's going to take a bit more time. It's going to slow his process down. And his first collection of data has to go through all of the number ranges, not just the cases that are the current. He's got to go to, he'll go to about 88,000 in Africa and about 35,000 in Asia and so on. So he's got to check a lot of cases tomorrow, and he's got a program that does that automatically. By the way, when he's checking cases and grabbing the data, he's doing the same thing you and I could do. So he's coming to this site, cxstate.gov, and he's entering a case number in here. And let's just get a new code here. What he's doing is he's doing this. He's got a computer program that does what I'm just trying to do here. So you enter the code and you see the status of that particular case number, right? So he grabs that data and stores it in a database in order to present this information on his website. Now, this data is publicly available. There's nothing wrong with him actually scraping this data in this way. In fact, if the government wanted to make all of this much easier, they could just give us the APIs, please, and we would be able to access the data with less impact to their servers, because this is public data anyway, right? It's just that individually you're going to go through one case at a time, and so we have to have sophisticated computer programs that can go through and get all of these cases one after the other and store that information. So it's an accepted or known way of doing things. And there's nothing wrong with us doing this. This is official data and it's publicly available. So, it's perfectly okay for us to use it. But if you're wondering where the data came from, that's where the data comes from. It comes from the same thing. Now, you can't check any 2023 numbers. If I was to do the same thing on 2023 right now, let me just refresh. We'll do 4V, 6V, right? And it says an invalid immigrant case number. That's because the programmers for the government made it only checkable once you enter the new year. So at midnight tonight in Mountain Time, I think it is, in America, basically, the numbers will become available. They're already in the system. They're just not available for us to check until the 1st of January each year. And so when the time rolls over, it's midnight of 20, it's 1 minute past midnight in 2023, we'll be able to get at that data. And you would also be able to check your own individual case, but you're going to see, just sort of case information for one case. We want to show you the case information for all the cases. All right. So that's where the data is coming from. Hopefully we can get that data. Hopefully there'll be no hiccups, or the work that Xarthisius has done over the last couple of weeks has been sufficient to get around the problems that the government are trying to give us. All right. So we'll see how that works out. Okay. So I don't think I was showing you that actually. Let me just. What I was showing was this site, SEAC, is the data I wanted to be showing you there. All right, that's where the data comes from. Anyway, I hope that is informational and interesting to you. Fingers crossed for the data tomorrow, and let's get ready to study that data and enjoy that data. I think it'll be very useful. So I'm looking forward to have that. Many thanks to Xarthisius for putting the effort in on this again. And I hope Frank's going to also continue his efforts. It's very useful to have the two different threads, and they can figure out ways to have the best possible access to this data. All right, everybody. Hope that was informational, and thanks for listening in today. Have a great new year. Bye-bye now.